Looking at our world from a theological perspective. This is the Theology Central Podcast, making theology central.
Welcome, everyone. It is Sunday, November the 7th, 2021. It is currently 5:17 p.m. Central Time, and I'm still sitting here in the empty sanctuary of Victory Baptist Church, Ovalo, Texas. I spend a lot of hours in this empty sanctuary. I really do. A lot of hours. We talk about so many different things, so many issues, doctrine, theology, Bible studies. I truly hope all of the hours I spend here in this empty building is benefiting someone somewhere. And I hope that I can take this discussion and maybe improve upon it a little bit. I think in part one, I didn't even call it part one because I really didn't think it was going to be turn into part one, part two, part three. I know you laugh because yes, every time I start anything, it turns into multiple parts because I'm very poor at just making everything short, sweet, and simple. Because I guess in my mind, nothing is ever short, sweet, and simple. Everything is always complicated with 9 million questions associated with it, even if no one else sees the questions or sees the complications. But I really hope I can make this beneficial. I know it's already been somewhat controversial, but I cannot help that. But we need to look at it. So let me ask you a question. All right, let me ask you a question. When you look at yourself as a Christian and when you look at Christianity at large, so start with yourself. If we go back to how this day started, we started with a devotional thought about always looking to ourselves first. So let's look at ourselves first. Let's look in the mirror first before we look out the window at Christianity at large. If we look at ourselves, I want to ask you something. As an individual who professes to be a Christian, what do you regard as that which has great importance, worth, or usefulness? What do you regard as those things which are of the greatest importance, the greatest worth, or the greatest usefulness? I want you to be honest. If you were to list those things that are of the greatest importance, greatest worth, and greatest usefulness, what would you write down? If you wrote a list of the things that you value the most, let me state it that way. Those things you value the most, and those things you value the most would be defined as those things that have the greatest importance, greatest worth, and greatest usefulness. What would be at the top of your list? Would the top of your list be things related to God, to scripture, prayer, fasting? Would it be spiritual things, or would they be very earthly, fleshly things? And now, I know if I ask the question in church, right? Like if everyone was here in the sanctuary this evening, I'm like, okay, guys, what do you think is of the most importance, the greatest worth, and the greatest usefulness? Everyone would say, my salvation, Jesus, the Bible, because it's church. So in church, you give church answers. But in real everyday life, they would probably demonstrate, and I'm not saying this just to be mean to the people of my congregation. This would be true of me and true of you and true of every congregation. If we really got down to it, what we think is of the greatest importance, greatest worth, and greatest usefulness usually turns into like family, my health, money, things, cars, entertainment. And we say, no, I would never say that. You may never say it, but you live it, and I live it. So what is of the greatest value to you? And then let me ask a second question. What are the principles and standards that you think are of the greatest value? So what do you value the most? What are the things that are most important to you, the greatest worth to you, and of greatest usefulness to you? And then what principles do you value? What principles and standards do you value as being the most important values? Those principles, those ideas, what are those great principles you hold to? Would those principles be principles that come directly from Scripture? Or if you're honest, would they be principles that have derived from your upbringing, from the part of the country you live in, and listen to me, or derived from your political affiliation and your political ideology? I hate to say this. I think for some Christians, the Constitution of the United States of America Second Amendment, the right to bear arms and certain constitutional rights. I think for some Americans, the Constitution, capitalism, a conservative government is something they value far more than, say, the doctrine of justification or the doctrine of the Trinity. I know you're going to scoff at that, but I don't care. I see Christians get far more upset about things. How dare you say defund the police? How dare you take a knee for the national anthem? How dare you don't say the Pledge of Allegiance? How dare you try to take away my guns? How dare you say America is bad? They will get furious. Hey, the new president of the Southern Baptist Convention has an absolutely heretical definition of the Trinity on his church website. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. Many Christians, their values that they value the most. So what they value a lot of things that are not even related to Christianity or spirituality. And their values, in many cases, the values that are most dear to them are values that have nothing to do with Christianity, nothing to do with the Bible, nothing to do with theology. It's based off how they were raised and based off their political affiliation and their political ideology. And I'm sorry, I'm sitting there trying to take a drink of water, but I'm going to take a drink of water. I get so fired up that I want to take a drink of water, but then I don't want to take it. I've got the bottle of water right there going, okay, drink. Okay, so yes, I get fired up, but this is very important. This is very important. As a Christian, what do you value the most, and what are your most sincerely held values, the one you care the most about? Now, I know in church you're going to say, it's Jesus, it's salvation. You're going to say all the right answers. But look at what you argue and yell about on social media, what you get upset about, what bothers you. Some people will get so fired up because they see some news story on Tucker Carlson or Fox News. They get fired up. But if I come and say, hey, this person gave a completely fraudulent definition of the doctrine of the Trinity, and now they're president of the Southern Baptist Convention, I'll get a, what did you say? What did you, okay, I don't care. You say, but did you hear that Biden wants to give money to those who were separated at the border? Oh, wait, what? How dare they? What is it? Liberals, communist socialism. And you're like, whoa, calm down. Now, I'm not saying whether you have to agree or disagree with that. Just saying it begins to demonstrate what values, what principles are most dear to you. I think we got a church in America, and we've got us, you and me, that we value that which isn't necessarily spiritual. We value earthly, fleshly material more than we do the things of God, and our values are many times derived not from Scripture, not from Christianity, but from our political affiliation and political ideology. And when the values that are most dear to you are more in line with the Republican Party than they are with Jesus Christ, you have a problem. All right, now that I've done some preaching, let me tell you why I'm doing the preaching. It all started on November the 5th. In fact, I think it was November the 6th that I was here at the church. I'm like, okay, hey, I just got this news article. Let me react to it in real time. I hadn't even read it. And the article caught me way by surprise because it went in a completely direction than I was thinking. Because when I think of the word value or values, I was thinking that second idea. I was thinking of those two ideas. What we value, right? Those things we value as most important, and values those principles. I was bringing both ideas together. So an article about things that people value or their values, I was thinking of it in one direction and they go in a completely different one. But here's the article. The article is called 5 Takeaways from the PRRI's 2021 American Value Survey. So I'm like, okay, so these are the takeaways from this survey about American values. What are their values? What are they? So I thought it was going to be like Americans' values. They don't believe in this or they don't believe in that. But in my mind, value carries two ideas. those things we value, and then the values, those principles that we hold dear to us. And in a roundabout way, it's connected to the first definition because we value those values above everything else. But here's the direction they went. Let me read the article. The Public Religion Research Institute, PRRI, the Public Religion Research Institute has released its 2021 American Values Survey that asks thousands of Americans for their views on issues of cultural and religious significance, as well as their opinions on issues of the forefront of American political debate. While the survey revealed a vast difference in opinion among Americans based on differing political, ethnic, and religious groups, some opinion shown in the study was held by a majority of all groups. The survey is based on a response from people living in all 50 states. Here are the 5 takeaways from the American Values Survey. So in America, what do they value? And they're going to look at the majority that things people agreed on. And then I want you to contrast that with the church. And what does the church value? What does the church? And I think some of these values are a direct challenge to biblical Christianity. And I think many of these things are clearly seen inside the church. And if you remember what the first one was, which again caught me completely off guard because I wasn't thinking this, I think that we're going to go in a completely different direction, was this. Economic anxiety. I start laughing at myself when you see the word, but for some reason you're like, you can't say it. Yeah, that's always embarrassing. Oh, I hate this website. It has this stupid video that just keeps popping up over and over and over, and then I have to turn the volume all the way down. I don't know why this video keeps popping up. It's some woman talking. I don't know about why. I just want to see the news article. All right, but here we go. Now again, when I say number one, I don't know if these are a number one in importance, but of the American Value Survey, here's the first one. Economic anxiety looms large across all demographic groups. Economic anxiety looms large across all demographic groups. Now, when I read that, I'm like, well, wait, where's the thing they value? Like, I don't understand. This is a part of America's values. It's just really written weird because I'm thinking like, okay, Americans value. So I have to kind of reword this to put it in the context of values or what we value. But Americans, the majority of them, economic anxiety. I don't know why I'm having so much problems with the word this evening. Economic anxiety looms large across all demographic groups. So no matter the demographics, there is economic anxiety amongst most Americans. Now, that would indicate to me, if I put it in the context of value and values, that many Americans value above everything else is economic stability, economic relief, doing economic success from an economic standpoint, that they are doing better than they were before. Americans value greatly economic success. Man, I'm having so many problems. Or why am I saying economic? Economic. There we go. There's the problem. What am I doing? Okay, economic. Okay, the economy. There we go. We'll say it that way. The economy is a major issue for most Americans. Economic anxiety is plaguing many Americans. And so if I try to put this in the context of values, the economic ideas of security and of relief seems to be of such something Americans greatly value, and they're greatly worried about the condition of the economy right now. Economic issues are the things that are concerning them the most. All right. So I sit there and try to understand this, and we read all the way through this. So I'm not going to read through it again, but I wanted to, again, we can look out the window and say, man, look at all those Americans concerned about the economy. Look at all the anxiety they have. They value their economic standing above everything else. They value money and money security above everything else. Man, they're materialistic. We could say they're greedy. We could say whatever. But I think we need to look at the church. How does economic concerns, how does the economy, How does economic concerns, however you want to say the word this evening, okay, it makes me mad when I mess up, all right? How did for right now, I'll just show you how values can change. You know what I value right now? I value deleting this and starting over because I messed up that word. So you know what I value right now above everything else? You know what's the most thing I value the most right now? Not looking stupid, not looking foolish. You see? So at any point in time, something can become your dominant focus. Well, in a society where there's lots of economic issues, right? There's a lot of issues, supply chain issues, unemployment, jobs, COVID-19 vaccine mandate, all kinds of issues. That becomes the thing you value the most. And your values a lot of times will be like, my value is making sure that I have economic security, making sure I have economic stability. That's what matters most. Well, here's the thing from a spiritual standpoint. When money and economic issues become paramount and they take the position of preeminence, that has negative impact on you spiritually because you're looking at things from a materialistic standpoint and not a spiritual standpoint. So how, as Christians, do we value, honestly, spiritual mindset more than an economic mindset? I think that that's very, very important. And based off what's happening around us can greatly impact that, and it can change. But it appears that many Americans are greatly concerned about economic issues. And then they go through all the demographics. So that was number one. All right. Now, the next one. So there's the economy, money, materialism. The second, this one is very interesting. Again, takeaways from the American Value Survey. Here's the second one. Evangelicals most likely to believe that God has granted America a special role in history. So this seems to indicate, now this one goes very specific into Christianity. The first one is everyone is concerned, has economic anxiety. Everyone is concerned about it. But how does that impact Christianity? How does that impact the church? How does that impact what we do when economic anxiety is such an issue? All right, how does that impact us moving forward? I got to close this video again that popped up. All right, it's a different lady talking now. All right, here we go. Now, this one, though, is directly related to the church. Evangelicals. The evangelical Protestant world is most likely to believe that God has granted America a special role in history. Now, this one raised that for many Christians, they value America above many other things. For many, their values, like the values that they hold dear to them, involves defending the Constitution, being patriotic, standing up for the flag, saying the Pledge of Allegiance, no one kneeling during the national anthem, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. These are things they value dearly. But is that are they placing, in a sense, love for country as a value that then becomes idolatry from a biblical perspective? Where does country fall in to your Christian life from a biblical perspective? Because I don't find anything in Scripture about, hey, love God, love your neighbor, and love your country. It's not there. So where does it find? I'm just going to read some of this because I want to go through this quickly. While a substantial majority of Americans, 64%, agree that God has granted America a special role in history, white evangelical Christians are the most likely religious group to believe so. So it's white evangelicals who say God has granted America a special role in history. Now, again, we just have to think about this from a very logical biblical perspective. If we believe God is sovereign and God works all things according to his good pleasure and will, then let me make it very clear. Every country has been placed there by God. He has granted them power. So wouldn't all countries, in a sense, play a special role in history? Because they were ordained by God? They came to power by God? Or is it, why does evangelical Christians say, no, it's just America? Well, wait, didn't God bring the leadership of China to power? So are they not fulfilling their special role in history according to God's sovereign plan? Why is it always just America? It's America, 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 America. God bless America. God, America, America. God put America here for this. Like we say all this manifest destiny kind of concept. Why do white evangelicals so committed to that idea? It's like for many white evangelicals, to be a white evangelical means to be pro-America and to be patriotic. Well, how did we merge these concepts together? So the religious group to believe this the most is white evangelicals. Well, what does that mean for us spiritually? What have we done? In addition to 75% of white evangelical Christians, majorities of black Protestants and other Christians, along with half of Hispanic Catholics, think divine intervention plays a role in America's place in history. Well, again, if you're going to say divine intervention plays a role in America in history, then divine intervention would play a role in every country in history, including Nazi Germany, because God is in charge of all things. So, I don't know. So the Christian groups least likely to believe that God has granted America a special role in history are white mainline Protestants, white Catholics, among other groups. Believe other groups among both groups, 46% believe that the U.S. has a unique role granted by God. Non-Christians, 29%, and religiously unaffiliated, 18%. So if you're a non-Christian, then obviously you don't believe God has any special plan for America. But if you are a Christian, then I guess you do. But then if you're logic and if you're biblical, that would be true of all nations. So again, how does that work? Okay. And then they say a lot more, but I don't have time to go back through all of that. Now this moves to the next one. This is the one we haven't covered. All right. Most Americans support legal abortion. Supreme Court receives mixed reviews. Now, this is very important to understand. According to this, most Americans support legal abortion. Now, for most Christians, we should, in theory, value life, which would mean that we are opposed to abortion. And it would also mean that we should have a different view when it comes to a lot of different issues that sometimes many Christians are supposedly pro-life, are very quick to be pro-war, which I've never quite understood about that. They seem to be pro-life, but they're not always as supportive of life outside of the womb as they are of life inside the womb, which raises all kinds of questions. But I want you to see that according to this, most Americans are for legal abortion. Now, why is this so important to me? For this reason. So many Christians think the way to fix so many societal and cultural issues is through political force and passing laws. But let me just make this so very clear. Any victory you gain in the abortion fight through politics and law will be very short-lived if most Americans are against it, because they will vote out everyone who helped put it into place. They will vote in people who are very pro-abortion, who then will appoint judges who will defend that particular position. It's only a temporary victory. If you want to change people, they have to be changed through the gospel of Jesus Christ, where their mind is changed about sin. Their mind is changed about life. Their mind is changed about right and wrong. Christians always want to fight these battles in a very fleshly manner, but this demonstrates that the church has not changed hearts. We just now have decided to try to change it via politicians and the ballot box. And I just think that we have to realize that any victory we gain, anything that will stop abortions is a positive. But let's make it very clear. If the culture wants something, the culture is going to get it. If the culture wants gay marriage, they're going to get it. If the culture wants whatever they want, they're going to ultimately get. So this says this: most Americans support legal abortion. Supreme Court receives mixed reviews. While most Americans overall think abortion should be legal in most or all cases, 60% of Americans believe abortion should be legal in most or all cases. Beliefs about abortion differ considerably based on partisan and religious affiliation. In a similar way, 63% of Americans believe that the 1973 Roe v. Wade Supreme Court decision that legalized abortion nationwide was the right decision and should be upheld. That's 63%. 63%. Support for Roe v. Wade is highest among the religiously unaffiliated, which would make sense, 82%. Democrats, 81%. Non-Christians, 74%. That's interesting. Non-Christian. Okay, never mind. That makes sense. Okay, white mainline Protestants, 71%. So white mainline Protestants, 71% of white mainline Protestants support Roe v. Wade. 67% of black Protestants, 66% of independents, 54% of white Catholics, a majority of the religious unaffiliated, 84%, Democrats, 83%, non-Christians, 74%, black Protestants, 69%, while mainline Protestants, 66%, and independents, 62%, white Catholics, 56%, Hispanic Catholics, 54%, think abortion should be legal in all or most cases. So that's a lot of groups of people affiliated or not affiliated with Christianity in some way, shape, or form saying that Roe v. Wade and that abortion should be legal in most cases. That is a staggering number, which demonstrates that what the church failed to do was change hearts and minds. Because let me make it very clear. You can go stand in front of an abortion clinic holding up pictures of an aborted baby, and maybe, hopefully, that may stop one abortion, which is a great thing. But in many cases, you're not changing the hearts of people. You're actually going to create a situation that creates animosity, which then long-term pushes people to support abortion. And because we've got to change their hearts through the preaching of the gospel, not confrontation on a street corner. I know that's going to make me very, very unpopular, but it's just, I've watched all of the fights since the 1980s. In the 1990s was Operation Rescue and all of the protest in front of abortion clinics. Then we had some abortion clinics that were blown up and just some crazy things that took place. Clearly, you know what it didn't do? It didn't change the opinions of anybody because the majority of people believe abortion should be illegal. So while we were out there supposedly fighting it, we didn't change hearts because we thought instead of focusing on preaching the gospel, evangelism, we wanted to fight a culture war. And the culture war, you don't change hearts through a culture war. Those are some big numbers. The group least likely to view Roe v. Wade as the right decision are white evangelical Protestants. Now, this is crazy. I want you to hear this. The groups least likely to view Roe v. Wade are white evangelicals, 30%. Hispanic Protestants, 40%, Republicans, 41%. These groups are also the least likely to believe that abortion should be legal in all or most cases, with 24% of white evangelicals, Protestants, 30% of Hispanic Protestants, and 33% of Republicans holding that view. That still seems like low statistics. Those seems like low statistics in believing. Okay, I see what they did. Okay. These are the least likely to view Roe v. Wade as the right decision. Only 30%, only 30% would agree that Roe v. Wade was only 30% are likely to view Roe. Now I'm reading this correctly. So 30% of Protestants would agree that Roe v. Wade was the right decision. Right. So that's still 30% of Protestants would think it's the right decision. 40%. Those are low numbers, but that's still significant numbers, even of them believing that it's the right decision. So that in some ways I guess it's better because it's so much lower, but it's still somewhat disturbing that you would even find that much number even within Christianity. Even within Protestant Christianity, there's still a significant number that would say that they believe that Roe v. Wade was the right decision. That means the church hasn't even convinced people inside the church. They've convinced some, but not all. The question about Americans' view on abortion comes as the Supreme Court is scheduled to hear oral arguments in a case surrounding Mississippi's 15-week abortion ban, a decision in favor of Mississippi, which seeks to uphold the ban, would significantly weaken the precedent set by Roe v. Wade. Now, a lot of people think Roe v. Wade is going to be overturned. Maybe it will, but for how long? That's the question. America's trust in the Supreme Court, which consists of 6 justices appointed by Republican presidents and 3 appointed by Democratic presidents, differs. Okay, hang on. Okay, here we go. Let's see here. Okay. Yeah, the whole site crashed for a second. A majority of Republicans, so America's trust in the Supreme Court, which consists of 6 justices appointed by Republican presidents and 3 appointed by Democrats, differs based on party affiliation. A majority of Republicans, 54%, trust the Supreme Court, while smaller shares of the independents, 49%, and Democrats, 43%, express confidence in the court. And then it talks about the differing views of the Supreme Court. So, okay, now, I'm going to stop. I'm going to close this. This video keeps popping up and it will not go away. It's creating all kinds of problems on the site. Websites that do that drive me crazy. All right. So here's what I want to take away from this. A large number of people in our society support abortion. That indicates to me that the church, in one sense, lost the culture war. Because if the culture war, unless the culture war is just all it matters is you don't care what people think. If the culture war when it comes to abortion is just about trying to get Roe v. Wade overturned, maybe the church will win the culture war. Maybe. But I will argue, considering the fact that we haven't changed hearts and minds, right? And that even people within Christianity, many of them, even though they're less likely, there's still a significant percentage, around 30, 35, 36%, who will still accept Roe v. Wade as being the right decision, even though it's a small percentage. That is still significant numbers within Christianity. So I will argue that if your goal was to win a culture war by trying to overturn Roe v. Wade, if that happens, you could say, yay, we did it. But for how long did you do it? But guess what? If it fails now, if it doesn't happen now, it's never going to happen, right? If Roe v. Wade does not come to an end with the current makeup of the Supreme Court, I don't think it's ever going to go away. And if for some reason it fails, then that means all of the culture war was completely lost by the church, and we accomplished very little. We accomplished very little other than a lot of time, money, and effort, which could have been focused on discipleship and trying to bring people to faith in Christ. But even if you do overturn Roe v. Wade, it's going to be I believe it's going to be a temporary win unless the hearts and minds of people are changed. And so once again, some Christians value a culture war victory more than they do the Great Commission and the biblical mandate to go and make disciples. Like some people, their value is, they would say they value life, which is a great thing, and we should value life, but we should value trying to accomplish what God wants us to accomplish more than setting up our own agenda and our own priorities. Now, I'm not saying that the Bible doesn't tell us to care about life, because we should care about life. But what is the way to accomplish it? I put it this way. I think many Christians value trying to accomplish what they believe God's will is in their own way. And anytime you go in the Bible and you see someone trying to accomplish God's will in their own way, well, I can give you an example. God, I'll use Abraham. Well, God wants me to have, children. He wants me to have, my seed to be as numerous as the stars in the heavens. Well, I still don't have a child. Well, guess what? He wanted to accomplish God's will in his way. Next thing you know, he's sleeping with a woman who's not his wife. There's so many times in the Bible where someone's trying to accomplish God's will in their way. Trying to accomplish God's will in our way almost always leads to something compromising in some way, shape, or form. I'm not saying listen to me. I'm not saying that as Christians you can't vote for candidates who are opposed to abortion and wants to end abortion. I'm not saying you can't vote for that. In no way in shape or form am I arguing against that. What I'm saying is that we thought that we could fix this politically. Maybe protesting abortion clinics or doing all of those different things. But the real issue has always been and will always be the gospel presented to lost people, conversion, teaching them to obey. That's how you change culture. It's never done through all the different ideas that Christians sometimes come up with to try to accomplish what they believe God's will is, but they're trying to accomplish it in their own way. All right, now, number 4, I should say. Americans who attend religious services regularly more likely to trust religious leaders. The survey asked respondents to weigh in on how much they trusted certain individuals or groups of people, including religious leaders. Overall, slightly more than 1/3 of Americans, 36%, expressed trust in their religious leaders. 54% of Republicans said they trusted religious leaders. The confidence in religious leaders is considerably lower among Democrats, 30%, and independents, 34%. Confidence in religious leaders were measured at 64% among white evangelicals. Trust in religious leaders was much higher among respondents who attended religious service at least once a week. Majority of white evangelicals, 74%, white Catholics, 73%, black Protestants, 67%, Christians, 64%, Hispanic Protestants, 62%, mainline Protestants, 58%, Hispanic Catholics, 51%, who attend religious services at least once a week express confidence in their religious leaders. All right. So many within Christianity value religious leaders. All right. Now, I don't think there's a major thing there to be. I think that's pretty common. I mean, if you go to church all the time, hopefully you value and trust your religious leader to some level. All right. So that's interesting. I'm not going to spend a lot of time with that one. And then let's go to the last one. All right. Now, this was interesting. Hang on. I got to close this video for the 19,000th time. All right. Here we go. Here's number 5. Americans of all religious and political background supporting letting Afghan refugees into the U.S. As chaos engulfs Afghanistan. Okay, now, this website's doing weird things again. As chaos engulfs Afghanistan following the withdrawal of U.S. troops, majority of Americans are indicating support for allowing Afghan refugees to resettle in the U.S. Overall, 66% of Americans oppose passing a law that would limit the ability of Afghan refugees to enter the country. Opposition to a law that would prevent Afghan refugees from entering the U.S. stands at 50% among Republicans, 73% among independents, and 77% among Democrats. Majorities of all religious groups surveyed express opposition to preventing Afghan refugees from entering the country. Non-Christians, 87%. Religiously unaffiliated Americans, 77%, are the most opposed to keeping Afghan refugees. Okay, no, this is interesting. Non-Christians at 87%. Religiously unaffiliated Americans are the most opposed to keeping Afghan refugees out of the U.S., followed by other Christians, 68%, white mainline Protestants, 67%, Hispanic Catholics, 65%, black Protestants, 63%, white Catholics, 61%, and white evangelical Protestants, 57%. Now, that is interesting. There's a lot of people who are opposed. Okay. All right. No. Okay. I want to make sure I'm reading the statistic right. So, yes, I want to make sure. So that's a large percentage of people who are opposed to keeping Afghan refugees out of the U.S. They are against keeping refugees out of the U.S. from Afghanistan. That's a large percentage. Now, it is interesting that white evangelicals are all the way down to 57%. So if you're a non-Christian, you're less you're going to be more opposed to keeping Afghans out of the U.S. You're going to be against any attempt to keep them out. If you're a non-Christian, if you're a Christian, if you're a white evangelical, you are going to be, in fact, white evangelicals are on the lowest end here. White evangelicals, there's going to be more white evangelicals who would support keeping Afghan refugees out of the U.S., which is kind of interesting. I wonder why. I wonder if evangelicals are more influenced by the fact that Biden is president than they are anything else. Like if you're a Protestant, and what's making your determination? Well, you know what? I think maybe we should be opposed to keeping Afghan refugees out of the U.S. I think we should be opposed to it. If you're doing that because Biden is president, that says that you're determining your values based off a political party, not on the actual situation. A group of Republican elected officials have expressed concern about Biden administration's vetting process for Afghan refugees after a teenage Afghan refugee allegedly sexually assaulted a teenage girl at a hotel in Montana. The state's Republican governor sent a letter to President Joe Biden calling for a halt in the resettlement of Afghan refugees following the rape when Senator Steve Daines asked Homeland Security Secretary why the perpetrator was given humanitarian parole status. In September, 2 Afghan men staying at Fort McCoy U.S. base in Wisconsin after being evacuated from the country have been indicted by a federal grand jury on separate charges of forcibly engaging in a sexual act with children and assaulting a spouse by strangling and suffocating her. Other concerns that have been raised involve child brides evacuated out of Afghanistan who were brought to Fort McCoy in Wisconsin and transit sites overseas. Last month, a State Department document showed that it sought urgent guidance from other agencies on what to do because of child marriage is illegal in U.S., and some girls said they had been raped. Now, some pretty serious charges there. So it is interesting that the majority of everyone are opposed to anything stopping the Afghans from becoming refugees coming into the U.S. So it seems like everyone they value the refugees being allowed in, and they value, in a sense, standing opposed to anyone who would try to stop it. However, some of those news stories, clearly, maybe the news stories has impacted. Because it's interesting, white evangelicals are the least, there's going to be more white evangelicals who are opposed to the resettlement or allowing those Afghan refugees in. There's going to be more white evangelicals who stand against that and support opposing it than any other group. So what is it amongst Christians? I wonder if it's those news stories. I wonder if those news stories go, wait, time out here. We need to be opposed to this until we find out a better system. I wonder if that, or if it's because Biden is president. It's interesting that Christians, of all the groups, it's Christians who would be like, well, I can support being I can be opposed to the Afghans coming in. This raises a lot of questions about Christians and the whole immigration issue, like illegal immigration and immigrants coming in, whether from Mexico or Afghanistan. I think in many cases, it's Christians who seem to stand against illegal immigration. Now, I wonder if they stand against it on the basis of law or some other moral reasoning. And then I wonder how that is viewed in light of Scripture. This one is interesting to me because again, all of these are interesting because when these are the value survey, what do we value? So some could raise the question when it comes to illegal immigrants or people fleeing these horrible situations, do we value helping people more than upholding law? Or is there a way to support both? I think sometimes this gets painted in a very black and white way, and I don't know if it's always black and white. Right? If you're opposed to illegal immigration, that doesn't have to mean you don't care about people, because some people say it will. But in some cases, it could mean a lack of caring for people. And then you have to think about how does that impact the country? Like there's only so many illegal immigrants you can come in to, it begins to have devastating consequences on things happening within that particular part of the country and society, social services, hospitals, schools. It can have negative consequences as well. I think this is a very complicated one. So it's just interesting that this one shows up in the values here, in this value survey. So Americans of all religious and political backgrounds support letting Afghan refugees into the U.S. And it says, as chaos engulfs Afghanistan following the withdrawal of U.S. troops, the majority of Americans are indicating support for allowing Afghan refugees to resettle in the U.S. Overall, 66% of Americans oppose passing a law that would limit the ability of Afghan refugees to enter the country. So most Americans oppose any passing of a law to stop this from happening. However, among evangelicals, they're the least likely to stand against any law that would oppose this. It's just like that. In other words, there would be more Christians who would support it, a law opposing Afghan refugees. I'm just trying to process how Christians would be thinking on this subject. Now, if you hear some of these news stories about the bad things that happened by some people who got in, you could be like, whoa, slow down. Bringing people in, putting in other people at risk and hurting people. If you're going to care about people, you got to care about everyone, not just the refugees. You got to care about the people who could be negatively impacted about it. So how do we do this? So it's just interesting that it's Christians who seem to be the anomaly here. And white evangelical Protestants. Why? That is just weird. I'm just trying to figure that out. Like if you're not a Christian, the numbers are, high here. Non-Christians, 87% of non-Christians are the most opposed to keeping Okay, I'm just trying to look at these numbers. So non-Christians and the religious unaffiliated are the most opposed to keeping Afghan refugees out of the U.S. So how this is written very weird because they've got it two ways here, right? They've got this idea of opposition to a law that would prevent it. So they've got the statistic here, an opposition to a law that would prevent Afghans from entering the country. All right. So 50% of Republicans, opposition to a law that would prevent Afghans, 50% among Republicans are opposed to a law that would prevent Afghan refugees from entering the country. 73% among independents, 77% among Democrats. Majority of all religious groups surveyed also express opposition to preventing Afghan refugees from entering the country. All right. So, okay. All right. Now I'm reading this correctly. All right. So it's non-Christians who are the most opposed. So it's non-Christians of all the group. Non-Christians are the most opposed to keeping Afghan refugees out of the U.S. So non-Christians are the ones who are the strongest for saying, no, I'm opposed to keeping them out. If you try to keep them, it's the back and forth in the article like, okay, these are opposed to keeping them out. These are opposed to any law that would keep them out. So it's really weird the way it's written, or at least to me it is. Maybe not to you, but when you're sitting there trying to explain, the language goes back and forth. So I'm making sure that I am correct here. So if you're a non-Christian, then you are the most opposed to keeping Afghan refugees out of the U.S. So if you're a non-Christian, you're like, no, I'm opposed to you keeping them out. But if you're a Christian, a white evangelical Christian, there's only 57% of white evangelical Christians who are opposed to keeping them out. So that means that the least support, there's more Christians who would support keeping them out. That's what I'm still trying to process. Why would Christians be the lowest group? Like when it comes to, hey, you cannot keep them out, you're going to find less support. It would be interesting to talk to Christians and figure out why. Hey, are you opposed to keeping out Afghan refugees from coming into the country? Are you opposed to keeping them out? No, I'm support keeping them out. Why would there, again, either it's because it's Biden or it's because some of these news stories of the bad things that's happened. It's a very interesting, when you look at these statistics, trying to break down how the Christians are thinking here, to me is very complicated here. It's very complicated there's such a major discrepancy between non-Christians and Christians. I mean, 87% of non-Christians are absolutely opposed to keeping Afghan refugees out of the U.S. They do not support keeping them out, where only 57% of Christians are opposed to keeping them out. So that means there's more Christians who support keeping them out. I just don't get why. The country fell apart, and there's a lot of Christians like, let's just keep them out. Like, what's motivating that? What's motivating that? You would think that on one hand, you would think a Christian would be like, no, bring them in and then we can evangelize them. Instead of having to send missionaries to war-torn Afghanistan and the Taliban, literally they're coming here, we can care for them, feed them, support them, and minister to them. I don't know. It's just an interesting, what do we value the most? Do we value a pro-America policy more than we do a spiritual mindset? That's just an interesting number. That's the one that's really caught me off guard, just trying to understand it. So, all right, I'll stop right there. I got through all five. I wanted to get through all five. You can kind of process that yourself. What do you think about this? You may have clear thoughts on this, and I know I'm trying to just react to it and trying to process it because my brain, I'm like, what? Wait, non-Christians, Christians, and like some of the statistics, there's close. It seems in some of these issues, there's almost a closer agreement between non-Christians and Christians, but this one seems to be a massive discrepancy. And I'm just trying to figure out what changed, what happened in the Christian world to go, you know what? I'm not so sure. I think maybe we need to keep these Afghan refugees out. Look, what started changing the minds of Christians? Where the non-Christians are like, absolutely not. I oppose you trying to keep them out. And there's a large, I mean, it's still 57% of white evangelicals who oppose keeping them out, but that's the lowest number of any group. That just seems odd to me. Maybe I'm just stumbling over it, and this is where I wish everybody was here because then they would all give me their thoughts. Who knows? Maybe I have a lot of people in my church who think the Afghan refugees shouldn't be let in. I don't know. Now, I do. Now, you could talk about the vetting process. We could talk about the whole, we could have a long discussion of how everything went wrong there. I think, we went into Afghanistan for a purpose, and then that purpose turned into rebuilding nations, and then we stayed there for year after year after year after year after year after year, spending trillions of dollars, which I think made no sense from a military standpoint. To me, the whole thing fell apart. And then all of a sudden, it's time to get out, and we seem to have no organization or plan, and then to pull everything out, and the country descends into utter chaos. And next thing you know, you're trying to get people out with no clear plan and system and how to do it safely, effectively. And, but at the same time, you don't want people to suffer. It's just the whole situation is just really bizarre. So there's the values of 2021. A lot of that has a lot to say about the Christian church. And you can tell me what you think about all of it by emailing me at newsif@yahoo.com, newsif@yahoo.com. I apologize for messing up economic. I guess it's not that big a deal. But I am going to sit here and look at this number now for a while and try to understand why is white evangelical Protestants so low on this. What changed? I just don't know what changed. Well, you know what? If you think, now that I'm thinking about it, opposition, so I've got to just point this out now, because now I think this is making a little bit more sense. When it comes to Republicans, only 50% of Republicans are opposed to a law that would keep Afghan refugees from entering into the country. So that's 50% of Republicans. White evangelical Protestants, 57% are opposed to keeping Afghan refugees out of the U.S., are the most opposed to keeping them out. So if you take what the Republicans, 50% of Republicans are opposed to a law that would keep them out from entering in. So there are only 50% of Republicans oppose a law that would prevent them from there. That means 50% of Republicans would support a law that would keep them from entering the U.S. So 50% of Republicans are like, nope, they shouldn't enter. Well, only 57% of Protestants opposed to keeping the Afghan refugees out of the U.S. So that makes sense that white evangelical Protestants are more in line with Republicans. When you go to Democrats, 77% of Democrats oppose a law that would keep Afghan refugees from entering the country. So that seems to make sense. White evangelical Protestants are more influenced by the Republican Party than maybe a biblical perspective. Maybe that's what I'm seeing there, which that fits in with so many issues. Anytime you look at how Christians think and how Republicans think, they're very hand in hand in many white evangelicals. And which then, I don't think it's because the Republican Party is being influenced by Christians. I think it's Christians being influenced by the Republican Party. So maybe that makes sense. I don't know. I'll stop right there. You can email me, newsif@yahoo.com, newsif@yahoo.com. An interesting look at what's going on in our country, within the church. What do you value the most? And where are your values originating from? Thanks for listening.